The Path to Authenticity is brought to you by GIA Miami. Founded by world-class mental health experts, GIA provides advanced care for difficult-to-treat conditions, including anxiety, medication-resistant depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. Using state-of-the-art methods, GIA can help people recover from conditions when more traditional approaches can't. Dr. Antonello Bonci has assembled an expert team serving international clientele in a modern and resplendent Miami setting. If you or someone you love is suffering from depression, anxiety, OCD, or other mental health concerns, call GIA at 833-713-0828. You can learn more about GIA by clicking the link in the show notes or by visiting giamiami.com.
Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
I am Rita Ellen Mirchandani, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
If this is your first time here, thanks for checking it out. If not, thanks for coming back. I'm Tom Gentry, and this is The Path to Authenticity. Episode 176, featuring a conversation with the Akashic record reader, Reiki master, and shamanic practitioner Rita Ellen Mirchandani. So when we scheduled this conversation, Rita extended the offer to me to have a reading, an Akashic record reading. So we did that the week before we spoke. So first of all, I want to thank her for that. She's very warm and has a welcoming spirit, kind spirit, and it was very easy for me to open up with her and connect. So this was a nice conversation. If you haven't heard about the Akashic records, this is an opportunity for you to learn a little bit about that and to get to know Rita. And if you want to learn more about her from her, you can find a link in the show notes. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Here you go. Rita Ellen Mirchandani. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I love how this is all aligned so quickly, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah. I reached out to you a couple weeks ago and asked you to be on the podcast, and we booked it pretty quickly. But also, this time last week, you did a reading with me. Is that a correct way to describe it? Your thing is the Akashic records, right?
Yes.
So how would you describe what we did?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for trusting me with that. It was an honor. And I would definitely call it an Akashic record reading. So for anyone who might listen to this that is unfamiliar with that, I'll describe it in the way that the way it resonates most with me, which is the Akashic records are this energetic plane of the past, present, and future. And while everything is available in that plane, the way I see it is in a reading, it's a soul-to-soul session. And what that means is that whatever comes up in the reading is from your soul, directly from your soul. So while everything might be available, only what is for your highest good for you to know right now on a soul level will come up. And that's essentially what we did together.
I knew about the Akashic Records before I sort of discovered your account on Instagram. And I wasn't entirely sure what to expect when we did that. But my experience with it before, I think I heard about it maybe 10 years ago at this point. And I was meeting with a colleague, and I'm an addictions counselor. And this is this woman who I've known at this point for 25 years. We started our careers around the same time at the same place. I hadn't caught up with her for a while, so we met for coffee. And I knew that she and another person who I know were hired to set up this addiction treatment facility in Belize. It was already open, but they were having problems. And so she and this guy went down there, and all the proper pieces were in place. They had good staff and resources. Everything was good. They were getting clients, but people were getting sick, and all sorts of weird stuff was happening in a way that just really puzzled her, until at one point she started to wonder, I wonder if something bad happened here, and if there's some spiritual aspect of what's happening. And she started to research it and found out that, in fact, lots of people had died there in a very tragic way. And she ended up bringing in some sort of shaman to cleanse the place. And so this is what led her to the Akashic Records. And I mentioned to you when we talked before that my experience with it was like a lot more around locations. And I've in fact gone back to her at other times when I kind of felt like I was in the same situation in a less dramatic way, and just kind of asked her for some guidance as to how might I cleanse this place. And she mentioned like putting copper in the ground and all kinds of stuff like that. It's just really interesting to me. So have you heard of that sort of thing, or do you know people who sort of work in that part of this?
Wow. Well, that's really an incredible story about Belize. And I'd be curious to like learn like how it changed over time too, after like the cleansing and what they found. So thank you for sharing that. And I would say the start of my spiritual journey, which was back about 5 years ago now, it was a lot more working with like spirits and different energies and learning how that all worked. I don't do as much of that now, but I would say that it wasn't my calling to keep working there, but it's a very interesting realm, and it's very intense sometimes. So I really admire anyone who can like work in that realm for a long time, but it's so needed.
So, you know, I don't know a lot about your story, but I've read a little bit and I've watched what you've posted online. What were you doing before you began to do this kind of work?
Yeah, so pretty much most of my life was a very just following the path type of life. I had I went to high school, went to college, and I just always thought I'll work in business. That was kind of my idea. And I knew I wanted to be in leadership, but I wasn't really sure how that would play out. And the defining moment really in my life was I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I was supposed to go to Washington, D.C. to study human rights. And I had this like moment where I like woke up in the middle of the night. I had already paid for my first semester, and I was like, this isn't right. You're not meant to go there. And I decided not to. And instead, I was able to, within a week, which I'm not to this day really sure how, I got into a hospitality master's program. So I realigned my whole trajectory at that point to hospitality. And I started working in hotels, doing sales and events, and I really enjoyed it. And it taught me a lot about people and business and a lot about organization, which has been really useful in a lot of ways. But at a certain point, when the, so to speak, spiritual awakening began, I no longer wanted, or it no longer felt aligned to be in that work anymore. And that's when I slowly started to transition.
And what did that look like?
So I was working at a hotel in Sarasota. I started to get this feeling of, you're not meant to be doing this. And it was a weird feeling because I had just gotten my master's degree. I had just worked really hard to get a promotion. And all of a sudden it was like, you're meant to leave your job and you're meant to go to Asia. That was the feeling I got. And eventually, after some time and really deep soul searching, I decided I needed to listen to that. And so I left the job, but it wasn't as easy as it sounded. Everyone was like, are you sure? Take a vacation. You don't need to leave permanently. But that didn't feel right. I knew I needed to give up everything I had ever really held on to in my life. That was my path. So I did. And I went to Asia for 6 months to explore spirituality. And what I found was at the end of the 6 months, I was nearly running out of money. And I wasn't really worried for some reason. I was just like, it'll work out. It always does. And I ended up coming back to the US because I got a job in hospitality. But it ended up being that the job I was offered was actually a huge promotion compared to what I had before. So looking back on it, even though I took those 6 months and like it felt like it was this crazy thing to do, I actually ended up in a way better position upon returning.
So I imagine, I think most of us, if we make a decision like this, especially when we've gone away to school and sort of like you called it following the path, and to me, that's like following the story that's already written for us before we ever really decide what we want to do with our lives, right? That's kind of how it works. So what about your loved ones, your friends, like the people in your family? Did you experience resistance?
Definitely. I would say that our relationships, especially the ones that have known us the best when we make decisions like that, are the place for the number one place for healing. And for me, it was, in my journey, it was about not looking for validation outside of myself anymore. Because that had been a huge part of my life, was wanting others to approve of my decisions. And honestly, when I made this decision, no one really approved of it. Or I don't want to say that they thought it was a bad decision, but they were kind of shocked and couldn't necessarily understand it because they thought, you have a nice life. Like, don't run away from it, is kind of what it seemed like to everyone. But I really had to follow that internal knowing. And one of my family members was really, really resistant to this. But upon returning, when they saw me again, they said, I think that's the best thing you ever did. And that was I didn't need the validation, but I already had it within myself, but it showed me that I could trust myself. And I think that was the most important thing I learned from that.
So that was when you got back from Asia?
Yeah, that was when I got back. And even to this day, they still say, like, that was the best thing you ever did. Before I left, it was not described like that. It was like, this is a mistake. Don't do this. But, oftentimes our loved ones fear, right, that we might end up in a worse off position. So they do things out of love, which can come from fear. But once they see it works out, they're finally able to relax.
Mm-hmm.
And I totally understand that. It was hard while I went through it, but honestly, it was one of the most healing experiences in that relationship.
It's really all about our relationship with ourselves, isn't it?
Really is. I mean, if you can validate yourself and what you're experiencing, you can, dramatically change your whole life.
Yeah. And, the story of sort of why I do this podcast and why it's about what it's about, and sort of where I veered from my true path in life, sort of started with succumbing to that pressure and fear from the people around me when I was finishing high school, and the things that I feel like were kind of written on my heart, like writing and having some sort of career in media. It was, well, how are you going to pay your bills? Are you going to work at McDonald's so you can write? And eventually it was, well, people, you could get a trade. Like, people always need a plumber. And that's what I ended up doing. And very quickly became profoundly sad.
Yeah.
And then sort of descended into a drinking problem. And then my spiritual path started when I resolved that, when I started working on that and beginning to change and realize that, for me to be okay and to be happy and to flourish, I have to be true to myself. I can't like live the lie that I think a lot of people do, or settle for something less than what I actually want. It just doesn't work for me. And I don't know, I just sort of accepted it. And then there have been other moments over the years where it's been sort of the same thing on a smaller scale. And one of them was I had this contract that was coming to an end after about 2.5 years. And I'd gone through this succession of jobs that lasted around 5 years and did really well and all that. But in truth, I was selling myself out. I knew every time, each of these jobs was like a shiny object, and I would pursue it and take it and be flattered by it and excited for about 6 months. And then the reality that this isn't really what I want to do would settle in. And then it became, okay, like, I don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I don't want to, I don't really want to do this. And just basically being at war with myself. And then finally, after that contract ran out, I just decided I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do what I, pursue the kind of career that I've always wanted to create for myself. And had I not done this, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. I wouldn't be 3 years into this podcast. And, but what's great about it, and what I wonder about when you got back from Asia and they told you that's the best thing you ever done, the first thing I thought about is, I bet she was so happy. And I bet she looked as healthy and as good as she's ever looked. And for me, just like making that decision and sort of planting this flag where, no, I'm going to live my life my way. It hasn't been easy, but I've been happier than I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. When you were speaking, like, I got a lot of chills, and I also saw a lot of like mirroring of what I felt in my path based on what you shared in your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the thing that kind of took over my life before I decided to take that trip was I had an eating disorder. And this went on for a number of years. And it wasn't really till I was on the trip that I noticed why it was going on. And it was because I constantly was suppressing my intuition. There was this constant not listening to who I really was. And on that trip, when you said like feeling happy and healthy, it really started a little bit before that trip where I was becoming happier and healthier, but it was the path to even taking that was what ultimately really healed me. And upon returning, I never really had any issues with that again. It wasn't even really in my conscious mind anymore. And what also was interesting, so when you talked about how like life will kind of give you these opportunities to take jobs and stuff, I had that opportunity as well. And in Buddhism, they call this Maya. So the way I saw it was I came back from Asia and I had this job, which was paying me almost double from what I was paid before I left. So even from a financial standpoint, I got really blessed. Where it was like, okay, you took this time, you did what was good for your soul, and now you're making financial headway. And what happened then, though, was that I knew I was not meant to be there long term. So I expressed like, I just want to do this part-time. And I ended up on my last day at this company being offered a position that really would have set me up very well. And they even said, like, you can travel and do this position, because they knew for me, I wanted to be able to study spirituality and travel. And it was like this, like, kind of like gem from the universe of, are you able to take this, or are you going to take this? And the empowerment that came, though, from that moment of saying, I see how good this looks, but I'm going to choose me again and trust that wherever else I'm being led is better than that. So I think that happens a few times on our journey where we're kind of offered those moments, and sometimes we take them, sometimes we don't, but it's always a learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Another sort of less dramatic example of making a bold decision for me was, I think I told you, I recently moved from South Florida to Indiana, where I grew up. And, I'm pretty established in this career that I've been in. I've been in that market for 25 years. And, it just, a lot of what's going on in my world is happening there. And there were some people who just kind of looked at me like, what are you doing? Like, why are you, it's cold there, right? Like, what are you thinking? And then my siblings were happy to have me come home, but there was also, I know, nobody said it to me, but I know they were, like my sisters were going to my brother saying, what do you think? Do you think he's making the right decision? And when I first talked to my brother about it, the first thing he said was, well, don't make a rash decision. Because my mom had just died. But I knew, like, there was absolutely no doubt. I had no doubt that this was what I was supposed to do. And what's awesome about it is that as soon as I made the decision, other things started aligning. Other work, just, it got easy. It got easy to follow through with it. It's had its inherent challenges, but it hasn't been a struggle at all, and it's the same thing with this podcast. I realized maybe 4 or 5 episodes in, I interviewed this guy that I had never met, and just the way the conversation went and the turns it took, it just like gave me chills. Like, I know, okay, this is going to work. And it's been easy. I think that's for me when I'm trusting my intuition, life is so much easier. Things just kind of work.
Yeah, I think that's such a powerful, and when we hear it a lot, right? Like follow your gut. But this is a perfect example, I think, of like one step in the right direction. It can change everything.
Yeah.
And align it immediately.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And I think for me, the most difficult part of just beginning to live this way has been just facing the fear head on and not letting it make my decisions anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what a lot of people do. They just are so caught up in, well, the what ifs. You know, what if this doesn't work? You know, then what am I going to do? And then that involves pride and ego, and which all is, you know, has nothing to do with what your gut's telling you, right? That's all in the head, all of it.
Yeah. This was said to me in my yoga class this past week. They said, you know, discernment is knowing the difference between, am I actually dying or do I just feel like I'm dying? And I think that's often the way to look at fear too, is like, is this actually what it is, or do I just feel that's what it is?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a saying that I heard a long time ago. Feelings aren't facts.
Yeah.
You know, we can feel fear, but that doesn't mean, you know, that it's really informative, right? Or what I've actually learned and what I believe is that it is informative in that what we fear is where we need to go, right? What I'm afraid to do, that's probably a pretty clear indication that I actually need to do it.
Yeah. Well, I was just talking the other day with someone about this where, you know, I think when you start your own business or anything on your own, any adventure on your own, there's going to always be risk. And almost like if we were to look up the word entrepreneur, right? Like that had to be somewhere in the definition, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And what I find though is that the moment you take one small risk, all of a sudden it starts to be easier. And I think even if we look at like people who are making decisions all the time, they sometimes make it look so easy. And I think that comes from like once you start, it just becomes simpler. You start to lean into it more and you go with your first reaction. Does that seem true to you too?
Yeah. Yeah. I think about sort of ways that I've progressed in my career, and if I had to sort of simplify how I would describe it, it's been that I've learned to not doubt my judgment and to just listen to it and just trust it and follow it. And more, I just do it, and it works in general, you know, like I don't feel like, especially working with people, and like, I work a lot with guys, giving them guidance. You know, I don't fret about what to say. I just let it come out. And it's been, that's been a process, but it was really just overcoming self-doubt or fear that I guess, what a lot of people now would call imposter syndrome. You know?
Yeah. Well, I feel like on a spiritual level, right? Truth is never processed. So it's like getting to that point where we just trust the truth that wants to be expressed through us.
Truth is never processed. I've never heard that before. I like it though. Where'd you hear that?
It just came through as we were talking.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't know.
That's awesome. So what's like a day or a week look like in your life doing this work?
Yeah. So it really honestly changes every week. I'm sometimes very organized, sometimes not. And I find that's what works best for me. the one thing that's always, keeps me structured is like I have weekly client calls. So that I kind of know what parameters I have to be in just to base my life around that. But other than that, every morning, I take time for myself. That's always really important to me. It's not that I do the same thing every day. Sometimes I meditate. Sometimes I just lay out in nature, go on a walk. But the way my system works the best is I have to give myself time to think of ideas. And that's usually what my morning consists of. And then I usually will have one day a week where I just purely plan. I plan what's coming, what needs to be looked at, and what feels important, like whether it's a blog post or something to make a video on. It's important for me to always have space to be creative. And the other 4 days are things like, client calls, group calls, and just daily life stuff too, right? Like going to the bank or things like that. I try to leave my schedule like probably 30% open, 70% scheduled. That's usually what seems to be the like right numbers for me.
Yeah, you sound like you've solved some of the sort of challenges that I have in my world, like I really like the idea of taking a day every week to plan.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing for me was giving myself permission to do that. So, when I worked in the corporate world, right, like every day I was doing similar tasks and I kind of had deadlines. But being an entrepreneur, just doing this work, right, like you kind of set your own deadlines a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So having that day, though, to let creativity fully just unleash for me has been life-changing. And maybe it could even be half a day, right? But for me, if it feels helpful, I highly recommend it. Because your energy is just different. Just it's not having to modify to different type of schedules throughout the day.
Yeah, and so also the morning thing I do. And one of the challenges for me has been, it becomes counterproductive if I start to put pressure on myself. If the pressure to be consistent starts to sort of eclipse the purpose of taking the time in the first place, right?
Yes.
Like it's really about me connecting with myself. And if I'm so consumed with, well, I have to pray and I have to practice a certain amount of yoga and I have to journal and like at some point I really I've been good about it, I guess, in the last year or so to just like right now I'm not writing in the morning which I usually do all the time, and it's because it felt like awkward and I was pressuring myself to do it and guilting myself when I was not doing it. And finally, like a week or 10 days ago, I just said, you know what? I'm just going to take a break from this for a little while. And it started with like, I'm going to go take a walk in the park. I did that a couple weeks ago. I took my dog and went out early in the morning and walked some trails but it's like the whole artist date thing, the Julia Cameron Artist Way stuff, which is really how I started writing, journaling every day anyway, when I started getting into that.
Yeah. I feel like also for me, it was important that every day didn't feel the same. When I was in corporate, every day started to blur together and I couldn't distinguish like a Monday from a Thursday or what I did on those days, like very easily. And I think that's something for me that has always made me feel empowered is like, Like, for example, yesterday I took a class that, it's a communications class. So I remember that was a different day. And the way that impacts me is huge. Just being able to, whether it's walk in a different location, go to the beach one day, have a different type of dinner, something every day that just distinguishes day from day, that also has had a huge impact.
Yeah. And for me, I also don't like to jam pack my schedule. I try to avoid that. I don't necessarily live within the 9 to 5 parameters anymore. But if I want to go goof off in the morning for a couple hours or the afternoon and I don't schedule myself so that I have to rush, that drives me crazy.
Yes.
So from a quality of life standpoint, I just have kind of decided, I'm not going to schedule back-to-back appointments. I'm not going to pack my day too tightly. And what I'm going to really try to do is just enjoy all of it. And so if that means like doing something like this in the evening or on a Saturday, so be it. But the difference is I don't hate 5 days a week and then enjoy 2 days a week. I enjoy all 7 days.
Yes. And I think that's so fun and empowering, right? To realize that we have the ability to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think, I think we're just sort of indoctrinated to believe that we can't. We can't do that. We have to live the script, right? Work 9 to 5, have 2.5 children, be married. That's another big one that I've talked about a lot on this podcast, that when I was young, I had this belief that if I didn't get married by a certain time, which I didn't, it's like there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something I can relate to and something I think about a lot, which is I always ask myself, do I want that or was I told I want that? And, there's a balance between sure, that would be nice, but also not rushing divine timing and also really thinking, do I really want that right now? And where is that thought coming from? Is that thought mine or is that thought the collective consciousness?
Right.
It's liberating.
It is. It is liberating. But it also is, I don't know if alienating is the right word, maybe lonely.
Yeah. I had a coach before who used to call when you walked a path that others hadn't walked, bushwhacking, which is basically you're in the forest and you're knocking down all the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially when you're the first, generation or just area that's really doing that, you're going to feel that alienation to some degree, but it makes it easier for those who come behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely felt that, especially the clearest example of that is being essentially the first person in my family who is in recovery, who doesn't drink. I mean, that, and there have been many after me, but what that required of me at the time was to leave and not come back for a long time, from a big family. And there were times over the years when that, made me really weary. And I've made it clear to my siblings over the years, this wasn't what I wanted, to leave and never come back. That's not I didn't plan it. That's not what I wanted. And it definitely hurts, you know?
Yeah.
But it's also a calling too, you know? It's like, it's a purpose. It's bigger than just me.
Yeah. And what I was going to say is what a reclamation of who you were, to come back, like, you know, to your home area again.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that, that's come up in therapy. Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I was picking up on full circle from the start, right? Which is, I think you mentioned your brother saying, don't rush this. And, you know, it sounds like though, like a beautiful healing occurred. That's just what it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also he's really happy I came back, you know?
Yeah. Of
all of them, he's probably, I mean, he's the one calling me every day. He's the one popping in,
Aww.
You know?
Yeah. And that's just amazing.
It is. And it's funny because I'm the youngest of 8 and he's my oldest brother who was like my freaking hero as a kid, you know? And we never lived in the same town before, except for when I was really, really little. And then when he launched out into his career, which I was probably 3 or 4, he left town. And, so yeah, that's been really nice. But what the reclamation has been about has been, you know, I went out into the world to learn how to be myself, right? Which I could never really do before. I was always betraying myself in lots of ways. And so at this point, it's coming back but this time I can be myself.
Wow. You're entering that chapter. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's,
speaking on behalf of everyone who's on that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's never a dull moment. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that's fun. The beauty of life, right? It's that wave where sometimes we're there, sometimes we're not. And it's just that constant coming back.
Yeah. So what's next for you? What is it that you're planning on your planning day these days?
You know, great question. There's a lot of bigger ideas coming to fruition, but also, lately I've been spending more time on just human Rita. I have like business Rita and human Rita, and I worked really hard with business Rita for a while. So my planning days lately have also involved just like what sounds fun and doing a lot more of that. And I have a lot of the business stuff set up, which I'm really blessed for, like doing readings every week, having group sessions, having a community. And that took a lot of effort to get going. And so now I'm just enjoying what's been built and then allowing it to flourish. So I'm in a really lucky time, or I should say just feeling really blessed at the moment to let that flourish and also give back to the human Rita.
What's that look like?
So right now I'm taking this course, which I never would have taken, which is a communication course, but it requires, like yesterday we had to sing in front of 8 people and, you know, things that terrify me, but also I find fun and I think allow me to express parts of myself that I've never done before. And so it's just exploring things like that. I picked up painting. Yeah, there's these parts of me that I feel like I haven't been expressed yet. And now's the time I'm allowing them to just express themselves.
Okay. What'd you sing?
This is a judgment-free zone, right?
Of course.
It was,
it's not a clan song or anything like that, I hope.
No, I'm just kidding. It was The Little Mermaid.
Oh. Well, it makes me happy just to hear you giggle the way you did when you said that. So.
Yeah, because, I was like, I could sing a serious song, and then I was like, nope, if we're going to do this, we're just going to have fun. And that was the first movie that came to mind, So, yep, Little Mermaid. And the thing is, right, like everyone's as nervous as you are when you do something like that. So it was this just beautiful, liberating day.
Oh, that's great. So what about long term? You have long range goals, vision for this yet?
I do. So the Ego Sum community, that's the monthly community I have every month, which we discuss different spiritual topics. I really see this expanding. And one thing, going back to the word alienation, was that when I had my spiritual awakening, I felt incredibly alone, like very, very alone. And when I got very lucky that I had a teacher basically dropped in my lap, and that was the thing that really saved me during that period, because I thought I was just going crazy. And I feel like there is a place for there to be community where people can discuss what they're going through with spiritual experiences, and just get understanding of what they might be experiencing. And I think the best way we do that is through sharing and through others' experiences. So that's the vision for Ego Sum. And then hopefully that everyone who's a part of that community can share their gifts and what they're hoping for the world. And I really also have a big vision for the Akashic Records, which is, I think that at some point I would love to see it expand to everyone. I think that there's this belief that it is this like foreign thing that is only available to certain people. But, and maybe what you experienced, it showed that anyone can at any time access this. Like, it's not something we have to train for. It's immediate. It's available to us immediately.
Well, if you're open, that's the thing. If I was biased when we went through that exercise or overly skeptical, I wouldn't have had the experience that I had. I had to let go.
Yeah. And I think that there could be a point where the intermediate person, for example, me or whoever it is, the Akashic record reader, won't even be needed, because everyone will let go to themselves into their own Akashic record. And that's my vision for the future of what it is, that everyone realizes that they have this, if it aligns with their truth, right? They have this access and healing within themselves. And whether that's through like a guided meditation, just so that then people know where to go to actually find it. Because once you find it, you remember it. And it takes some, confidence of like, oh, am I actually experiencing what I think I'm experiencing? Like that sort of self-validation, that definitely takes time. But I have a vision where I hope that this can spread to more people, because it truly was what changed my whole life.
Do you, are you familiar with A Course in Miracles at all?
I've read chapters of it. I haven't read the full book.
Yeah, well, it's quite a book. It's quite a book.
I mean, I think there are people who've read the whole book, right? Because I went to a few meetings for it.
Yeah, that's what I've done. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's the kind of book that you like sit down and read. To me, it's so dense that, doing the lessons on my own is one thing, but like reading it, like I need to read it with people and hear what people have to say, and preferably with a teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's been, it's helped me a lot, especially in close relationships, like what kind of expectations I bring or don't anymore, and also not projecting my past onto the present moment. and not treating someone new as if they're guilty of the wrongs that have been perpetrated against me in the past, just allowing myself to see people as innocent, right?
Yeah.
It's been huge. Yeah. And also, I think, growing up in a very Catholic family, it just sort of, which I kind of never fit in, because I didn't buy it. It just makes a lot more sense to me, all of it, and I love that it's really about love, and removing blocks to love. That's really what it is. So I was just curious. But that's been huge to me. Yoga too has been a big deal to me. Because I've never really, the traditional sort of meditation stuff. Moving my body is important to me. And the moving meditation, I think, is really what works best for me, at least at this point in my life. And breath, learning how to breathe that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been learning more about the breath recently too, through chanting. Mm-hmm. And it's been really eye-opening, like how much I wasn't breathing and how unaware we can be of that and what a profound impact it can have in our life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. There's so much out there, right? And it's just like finding what works for our soul and our system to help us really move forward into, I guess, for lack of a better word, love.
Yeah. Well, is there a better word?
Yeah, maybe there's not. I don't think there is.
No.
Yeah, and I think that what's kind of fun too along this journey, I don't know if you found this, there's certain books or things that have started me off and I always come back to them.
Like what?
Like Eckhart Tolle. I always seem to come back. He really started me off on my spiritual journey, and I always find my way back to him. And even Autobiography of a Yogi.
Mm-hmm.
There's certain books that it doesn't matter. I just always, a few times in the year, I'm always picking them up and just re-referencing.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a number of books that I've sort of fallen in love with over the years. Some for those reasons, and others as a writer, that are just like beautiful and inspire me to read them. Yeah, Autobiography of a Yogi. I have it. I've listened to it, but I haven't digested it.
Yeah. So the way I read it was I would read only 5 pages at a time and then just like let it simmer, because there's so much to that book. And even now I can't remember certain chapters, which is interesting. And so what I'll often do is I'll often just pick up the book and open up to a certain page and just read whatever it is I opened up to and be like, okay, I'll just let this be for now. And then, I open it again whenever I feel called to.
Yeah. Thank God for like that kind of stuff, right? The nourishment for our souls. And another one that's been big for me, especially coming from, a Christian orientation, which I don't necessarily identify with all that much. I mean, I was having a conversation. I have this person I'm getting to know at this point who he was raised Catholic, and he ended up going to a monastery to become an Anglican priest, and eventually walked away from it, realized it wasn't what he wanted. And I'm attracted to those people. I have several people like that in my life, and usually I'm attracted to them and I want to learn from them. But I was talking to him about Buddhism, and he's like, no, I can't. I mean, like, he'll go to a different church every week. And I said, well, have you ever been to an ashram? Oh, no. Like, I'm a Jesus guy. There's no. And I said, but if Jesus was alive now, he'd probably be a Buddhist. I mean, that's what I believe. That if he was alive now, he'd be a Buddhist. But anyway, that's an aside. The book is The Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox, which goes through the book of Matthew and like the Beatitudes and explains what these all actually mean to us now. And then the end of it, the like last section is he goes through the Lord's Prayer, clause by clause, explaining what it actually means now and how we should look at it. And it's just so different than what gets drilled into us growing up, like in a mainstream Christian or Catholic faith. Just, it's different. And it really sort of hones in on the love part of it, the kindness part of it, which, one thing, if there's one belief I've had about this in my life that has been consistent and has never changed, it's that it's how you live that matters. It's how you treat people. It's not if you go to church. It's not what you say. It's not what you think or what you believe. It's what you do. Right? The rest doesn't matter nearly as much as how we live our lives. So anyway, this has been nice. So you ready for the big final question?
I'm ready.
Okay. So if there was a time in your life when the younger Rita most needed support, advice, when did she need it most, and what would you go back and say to her?
There's probably 2 times. The first was when I was 17, and the second was when I was, I think, 26 or 27. And I would tell her everything that you desire is possible and it's there for a reason. You wouldn't have those thoughts if it wasn't. So you can't look to others for that truth. You have to find it within. And if you even just let it show you a glimpse of it, it will constantly blossom.
I like that. I believe that, like, these things that we want. I was meeting with this guy a few years ago, and he was young, had been sober a couple years and was doing pretty well, but he wanted to be a park ranger out west. That's what he wanted to do. And he had a good job with benefits. It was fine. Everything was fine on the surface. But he was having trouble in relationships and stuff like that. And somebody sent him to me. So I started meeting with him once a week, and I kept going back to, well, what do you want?
Yeah.
And he really wanted to do this, work in nature. He wanted to like go to Utah. And he kept talking about how like his dad was, everybody was shitting on it, you know, like you got a good job, you got benefits, that's crazy. What are you going to do about this? And what are you going to do about that? And I kept encouraging him to like, well, start taking some action, let's plan, create a vision. Like, let's make it happen. And he wasn't, what really changed it to where he started to do that was, and it just came to me, these things that you want, God gave you those. They didn't just come out of nowhere. And you're not selfish for wanting it. God gave you that. And, it was like, it just kind of came out. I didn't even really think of it or, I didn't even give it a lot of thought or anything. And, he started his head was in his hand and he was looking down and I'm like, oh my God, is he crying? What did I say? And I'm like, what's going on? And he said, I just never thought of that before.
Oh.
And you know what? That's the last time I ever met with him. He went and got a job at Domino's, a second job, so he could start saving money. And he's in Utah. I haven't spoken to him again. I see him on Facebook, but like, it just makes me so happy to see, people go for it and really do what they want. And what I've learned is if we do that, we're better. We're better than we would be otherwise. We're energized. The happiness that comes with us, with all that, just makes it better, makes us better, I should say. So, and I'm sure that's true for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. And that's the thing, right? Sometimes that's what I have this belief that we often like play God, for lack of a better word, for each other, right? So sometimes, you might be having a bad day and, let's say you go to the grocery store and you hear those stories, someone forgets their credit card and someone buys their groceries, or, even in a smaller way, someone just opens the door for you and they don't know how much that means.
Mm-hmm.
We often play God for each other, and that's how the universe sometimes plays out. And in that moment, that's what it sounded like that happened for that experience.
Yeah. And and I'm sure you've experienced this doing this kind of work. It's a privilege.
Oh, so much, so much.
Yeah. What a gift.
I mean, there's no greater honor than someone trusting you with their vulnerability, their soul journey, their mental health. There's nothing greater in my perspective than that.
Well, I'm glad we crossed paths.
Me too. It's so nice, and you're doing such good work for the world, and it's really an honor to be here to speak with you.
Well, and so are you. And, I definitely feel different than I did before our last conversation. Like something shifted. It's subtle. It's nothing dramatic, but a change has taken place and it feels better and a weight has been lifted. So thank you for that. All right, there you go. Another episode in the books. Thanks for listening. You can learn more about the show and this episode's guest at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Every little bit helps. I want to thank the band Punk Rock Opera, whose music you hear throughout the show. Their songs are used with permission from the artist and under a Creative Commons license. If you're so inclined, check out the Patreon community. As soon as I do these interviews, I upload them to Patreon, where the content is only available to patrons. And for just a couple bucks a month, I usually post audio content, their exclusive audio content, probably 8 times a month, if not more. And as these new episodes are released, as soon as they're done, they're available to patrons. So sometimes that might be 2 weeks before an episode is released, or even longer. Usually it's a few days. Anyway, if you want to support the show, that's a great way to do it. So thanks again for investing your time. It's a big deal to me. Thank you for supporting me and supporting the show. I hope you keep coming back. Be nice.
That's our story. I hope you enjoyed the punk rock opera. And we have one last piece of music for you. It goes like this.
Okay, go. You cannot make us. We are the Jedi Man. We're just the losers that lived up the street, living on these chords, simple beats. You wanna cheat, you wanna stop, you wanna tear us down. We are the bad plans, man. We got our roots stuck in the ground. Musical generation, self-made bands. We cut our teeth with bloody hands. The rage has instilled in us. Can feed a crowd, give them a rush.
Thank you. And good night.